Alright, so in this homework video, we're going to talk about multi-step equations that have rational coefficients. So all of you know that rational coefficients are the number that comes in front of your variable. And sometimes these numbers are fractions. So I know that sometimes fractions are scary for all of you and you get a little nervous using them, but I'm going to do an example and you guys are going to probably, hopefully, feel more comfortable after this, and then you can use it as an example when you are doing other work or you need to study. Okay, so even though they're difficult sometimes, we have to persevere because we try our best and we do our best. So let's go over some very important rules that we use when we are working with fractions. If you are given a fraction as your coefficient, so the number in front of your variable, like this, 1/4 over r, this is a rational coefficient, and that is in front of your variable. So 1/4 r is a rational coefficient in front of a variable. Okay, you must remember that it is just another way of writing 1/4 times r. So your fraction times your variable, okay? In order to get your variable by itself, which is always what you want, you have to do the inverse operation. And since this represents multiplication, the opposite of that is division, okay? The inverse operation of multiplication is division. And in order to get your variable by yourself, you must multiply both sides by your rational coefficient or your fraction. But you're going to multiply by what? The reciprocal, because you flip and multiply. So we don't forget that we flip and multiply. Because we multiply both sides by the inverse fraction, okay? So let's go ahead and solve this equation together. So in this equation, you are given 1/4 r plus 2 parentheses 3/4r minus 1 closing parentheses. That is going to equal 1/4 over r plus 7. Okay? So when we solve this out, this side, all of this is going to equal all of this, okay? Now, my first step is I like to draw my line down my equal sign. Okay. So, in order to solve this multi-step equation, just like we solve any multi-step equation, you have to go ahead and sing through the song. So, can I use the distributive property? Can I combine like terms? Are there variables on both sides? Anything being added, subtracted, anything being multiplied, divided? Did I check my work? Okay, so in this equation, can we use the distributive property? Yes, we can use the distributive property. So check on the distributive property. What am I going to distribute? I'm going to distribute this 2 this positive 2, to my 3/4 r and to my negative 1. So when I use my distributive property, which is just like multiplication, I go ahead and I distribute my 2, and my new equation is I multiply the 2 by the 3/4 r minus the 1. So I distribute my 2 to the 3/4 r and the negative 1 or the minus 1. And my new equation is, well, here. What is 2 times 3/4 r? You get 6/4r minus 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. And then I just bring down what I had left over. So I still have my equal sign. I bring down my 1/4 r, my plus sign, and I bring down my 1/4 r and my 7. Okay? My plus 7. Alright, so now what's my next step in my song? It is, can I combine like terms? And I always want to combine like terms. When I use this combine like terms, I mean on the same side of the equal sign. So can I combine anything on this side of the equal sign? No. Can I combine anything on this side of the equal sign, on the left side of the equal sign? Yes. I can combine 1/4 r with 6/4 r on the left side of my equal sign. So when I combine them, it's just like adding fractions. I keep my denominator, right? And I just add my numerator. So 1 plus 6 is 7/4r. And then what did I keep? I keep my -2, so I bring down my -2. I keep my equal sign, and I bring down my 1/4r and my +7. Okay, next step. Are there variables on both sides? In this equation, there are variables on both sides, okay? In order to bring them over to one side, you're going to have to subtract the 1/4 r from both sides, okay? So I subtract 1/4 r from both sides. Because 1/4 r over here is a positive, I have to subtract it to get rid of it. So I subtract 1/4 r. And any number minus itself equals 0, so I know it cancels out. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I subtract 1/4 r. Now, I wrote it on your sheet, but that is the same as when you add, you keep your denominator and you just subtract your numerators. So 7 minus 1 equals 6/4 r. Okay? I keep my, here, I'm going to rewrite this. I subtracted my 1/4r and I got 6/4r. I keep my -2, so I keep my -2, I bring that down, -2. I keep my equal sign, and I keep my +7. So, what's my next step? Anything being added, subtracted. In this equation, the 2 is being subtracted from our 6/4r. So the 2 is being subtracted from our variable. So in order to get the variable by itself, you must use your inverse operation of -2, right? And you're going to add 2 to both sides. So I add 2 to both sides. -2 plus 2 is 0, right? Cancels itself out. But what I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I add 2, and I get do it over here because I'm running out of room. +2 equals 9. Okay. So I just have to bring down my 6/4 because I haven't gotten rid of my 6/4r yet. And I also bring my equal sign, and then I bring down my 9 now. Okay? So, as you guys know, 6/4r is just the same as 6/4 times r. And in order to get rid of the multiply, I need to what? Well, first let me sing the next step. Anything being multiplied, divided, yes. 6/4, we just discussed, is being multiplied by r. So in order to get rid of the 6/4 and get the variable by itself, you must divide by 6/4 or flip and multiply, right? So I flip and I multiply by my inverse. So I multiply 6 times 4/r, 6 times 4r by 4/6r, 4/6. Cancels out. My r is now by itself. I bring down my r equals, and what I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I multiply by 4/6 over here too. Now this 9, we know, is over an invisible 1. So that means 9 times 4 over, because I multiply across with fractions, both the numerator and the denominator. So 9 times 4 and 1 times 6. And I get 36 over 6. Now, can I simplify that? Yes. 6 goes into 36 6 times. So my R equals 6. Okay, now I'm just going to go over the steps one more time with you, but I want you to check the work for me to make sure that we did everything right. So that is your job. But if we're going to go over the steps one last time, my first step is I use my distributive property and I multiply my 2, which is outside the parentheses, by everything inside the parentheses. I bring all that down. I now have a simplified version of this, which is 1 over 4r plus 6 over 4r minus 2 equals 1 over 4r plus 7. So my goal is to get my variables on one side, but first I must combine like terms. So I combine my 7 over 4r minus my 1 over... I combine my 1 over 4r plus my 6 over 4r, and I get 7 over 4. Okay? I keep my negative 2, and I keep my 1 4r over 7. So then my next step is to subtract my 1/4 r from this side and bring it over to this side, right? And I get 6 over 4r, and I keep my negative 2, and I keep my positive 7. Then I have to get rid of anything being added or subtracted, which is my negative 2 or my minus 2. So I add 2 to both sides. And then I have to get rid of anything being multiplied or divided. So I have to get rid of my 6 over 4 in front of my r, and I do that by flipping and multiplying. So I flip and I multiply, it cancels out on this side. I flip and I multiply across, and I get r equals 6. So now it is up to you to check the work.